Thanks for joining us, everyone, on today's community call. We're going to have another conversation with a few gyms that have reopened. Um, so on today's call, we'll, as always, cover some of the ground rules, cover the features of Zoom that we use, and I'll introduce you to our panelists and hear a little bit about their story, and then give you guys a chance to ask some questions of them. So feel free to start typing in questions at any moment. You can do that right in the question and answer box. Um, so on Zoom, right at the lower middle of your screen, you'll see the three main controls. We have a chat feature where you can chat amongst yourselves, and a question and answer box. So any questions that you want us to address, make sure you enter those in that box, and we'll see them there and get them answered. If you see a question in there that you particularly like, or was going to be the question that you were about to type in, go ahead and click on the little thumb and upvote it, and that'll just bring it to our attention even more, and we'll try to get those questions addressed first. When you're chatting, um, you can either chat directly to the panelists, but if you want to chat with everyone, go ahead and click the two drop down and select all panelists and attendees. That'll make sure that everyone on the call can see what you're typing in. Our ground rules, as always, are to be polite and respectful, especially with our panelists. They've very generously donated their time and experiences to you guys. So yeah, keep the questions as civil as possible. If we give you guys a chance to speak, you can always raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Keep any comments to around 2 minutes or so. Keep any personal political commentary out of this. We're just looking at the operational and customer relation experiences that these guys have been going through. And anyone who's abusive to our panelists or to each other, we'll have to remove you just to keep the conversation flowing. So today we've been joined by two gyms that have opened. We have Britt Frankel and Michelle Frankel from DynoClimb in Florida. And we've got Mark Hillman from Treadstone in Georgia. And Treadstone, I think, is a unique case. They're, as far as I know, the first gym to have opened in the country back on April 24th. So they probably or definitely have more experience being open throughout the pandemic than probably any other rock gym on the planet that's not in Sweden, where some of the gyms stayed open throughout the entire crisis. So I'm going to hand this off. Well, we'll start with DynoClimb. And I know you guys have a little presentation, so I'll let you share your screen. And yeah, I'll let you guys share your story, and we'll get those questions starting to flow in, and we'll save those for the end.
Perfect.
All right.
We're going to pull this up for you real quick. So,
are you sharing?
Not just yet.
Okay, what happened? Sorry. Let's try that again. Okay.
All right, is that pulled up for you guys right now?
Perfect, thank you.
So just a little backstory on us. We're going on a year of being open. We're in Central Florida. Right now, with our state's mandate, we're at a 50% capacity on there. And there's ground rules to follow, cleaning equipment in between usage, cleaning shared spaces, obviously with touch points, making sure we're hitting those high touch points. With us, there's also a standard cleaning after close type of situation that is required from us. Group spaces in terms of 6 foot distance on spacing is required. And as a whole for the state, it's masks are optional, but highly recommended. Currently right now for us, we are members and punch pass holders only. So we're not accepting any sort of day pass walk-ins. So it's continued members and punch pass holders from there. We are accepting new members who've been out to the facility before and have climbed before. So biggest thing for us is not off the street walk-ins as we would take before with day pass users. Reservations are required. We're doing 2-hour blocks at this time frame and this point. In the future, we're going to be opening it up based on organic measures to make sure that we can control, obviously, the capacity standards and make sure everybody has that 6 foot spacing in between. Before, we actually allowed sneakers on our climbing walls, so we changed that rule in accordance with this to obviously mitigate as much as we can with different, cleanliness standards. So right now we're just doing climbing shoes only, no other sneakers. With increased sanitization standards, that's also a requirement for the state. We've increased the amount of sanitizers available in our gym. Before, we did actually have about 5-6 sanitizing stations already with hand sanitizer, things like that in there. And then we also did have 3 germicidal wipe stations too. But we've increased that to 18 stations total for sanitizing. And then also we increased it to 5 germicidal wipe stations too as well. We are requiring temperature checks at entry. So anybody below 100 can actually enter the building. But anybody that's above 100 is going to be asked to come at another time. And it's 72 hours from that time frame. If you guys want a copy of our slideshow, just email me at Brit@DynoClimb on there, as you see on the screen. Or you can follow us for what we've done on social media for at DynoClimb on Facebook and Instagram. We installed a couple measures to increase non-touch within our building and also on the external side of our building. We have a tow hook on the front door. So now with that, you don't have to actually touch the handle to enter. You can actually get a little tow hook practice, obviously good for climbing too. So you can actually hit that on the bottom and pull out to enter without using your hands on there. We've also used this within our restrooms as a means to exit the restroom, and then also with any other doors in which it was viable to do so with that hands-free option from there. Big thing also required within the state is to make sure we have signage up available and posted throughout our facilities. We did some research on what other industries were doing, and we compiled a list of also what we had in terms of our in-house policies and guidelines. So here on the left-hand side, you see before you enter what needs to happen within there. Are you feeling unwell? Have you experienced any symptoms within the last 72 hours? Have you been diagnosed? Have you been in contact with somebody? If you answer no to all of the above, you can come on in. Subsequently from there, then we complete our temp check. We have an employee who has a touch-free temperature thermometer up at the front. And we also have one in the back for our employee entrance too as well. So we follow the same protocols from our employees entering through the back of our facility, as well as the same with our athletes and visitors through the front of the facility. Upon entering, we have actually a hand sanitizing station, which is a non-touch. So our visitors and athletes are going to sanitize upon entry of the building. And then again, we had our policy change with climbing shoes are, required currently.
Also really quick, as far as it goes with employees, they of course, like you said, have to take their temperature, and we have a spreadsheet printed out in the back for everyone to check that they were under 100 at entry, and a reminder by the time clock as well, wherever they could clock in at, saying, yes, I confirm that my temperature is under 100 degrees. I checked. I have no symptoms. I remember, because masks are mandatory for employees. They're optional for our customers, mandatory for all employees. They're confirming that they have their mask and that they'll wear it at all times. So they have that reminder at entry, and then again in front of the time clock to make sure that's all confirmed.
Definitely. So as we enter, you see the sanitizing station on the front side upon entry with another representation of the signage. We also have 6-foot guidelines with please wait here on the floor. So it shows that spacing was 6 foot in between on our entry points. We also have a one-way around the whole facility to minimize that distance, well, to maximize the distancing, minimize people clustering. So from there, the crewmate takes the temperature. We have the please wait here sign, and then they can proceed to the check-in. All of our visitors and athletes have their punch cards now. So with that, obviously we have the stop the spread of germs. So another sign that we have up readily available with obviously the mitigation standards from the CDC. If somebody needs to do a waiver, they can do a waiver, of course, but for the most part, we've had nobody that needed to use our stations. We are still sanitizing those every 2 hours with high touch points, but we're trying to mitigate people using the waiver stations as much as possible, so they can do a scan on the QR codes to obviously do it on their mobile device or online preemptively before they enter the building. So as we're going through, this would be our member check-in spot. So we have a kiosk up ready to go for our members to scan and just go from there. So minimizing obviously contact aspects from there. You can see the borders where we have the one-way. If somebody does need something for the pro shop, they can come up to that section over there as long as there's nobody else in that 6 foot blocking from there too as well. We also, you can kind of see it from here, we set up plexiglass around our cash registers just to maintain obviously that sneeze guard distance aspect from there too for the safety of our crewmates. This was a thing that we have at the front that shows our new sanitization stations. We also color coded those with also a reminder to wash your hands intermittently. We're not requiring it after every single climb, but we are requiring, you know, sensible direction in terms of sanitizing, washing your hands. Best is obviously soap and water. We do have the sanitized stations for everybody within the facility. As you can see, we color coded that, so it's very easy, user-friendly for our athletes and visitors to see where they can sanitize upon entry and then also surrounding the whole building. With the 6 foot standards and distancing, we have the signage, obviously, please keep 1 lane between yourself and family group and others. So if 2 people come in together as a family group, they distance themselves from others 6 foot. So if you're coming in individually, you're distancing yourself from another climber within that 6 foot. With our markings, we tape that out so every 6 foot you can see where that distance point would be. Showing spacing on our opening day. So with the standards of the 6 foot and the distancing and the visualizing of the marks, it made things pretty fluid, and we were able to control some good distancing within our facility, even from our first day from there, from opening. With the one-way path, we have basically a circular kind of setup from there. So we put signage so that people can see that one way, and to make sure obviously they're following that protocol with exiting that one direction. Upon our exit, we have the Rockton Pro set up with a unmanned kiosk. We actually minimized the screen and put obviously a sign on there that says scan here to check out, trying to make it user friendly as much as possible. But from there you can see where our athletes and our members would come around and exit out that one directional front section and then exit the building. We also have a sign that's facing that direction that says sanitize before you exit too as well.
Yeah, that's just a little change from, because usually our members will scan in, but they haven't been scanning out. So it's just kind of a little bit of a cultural shift, and everyone to remember to scan out on their, as visitors as well. So if it's a supervising adult who's not climbing, they're just supervising their minor, they have to check in and out as well, just so we can maintain that accurate head count of whoever's in the building. So
it's a big thing with that head count, because obviously being, you know, 40% of our occupancy right now, we want to make sure we're maximizing and having a fair opportunity for all our members to climb, and also making sure that we keep that as accurate as possible. We are including our employees in our count of capacity. So with employees, when they check in, they're also going to scan in, and they're going to be scanned in during that time frame, so we can account for them within that 40% occupancy. And that's, I think, all we got.
That's a bit from the slides,
Yeah, that's all we got from the slides. We'll kick it off from here.
No, that was amazing, guys. And kudos to you on the branding, the floor tape being branded, all the signage that you've put up. Really looks top notch. And giving a little shout out to you guys on the video walkthrough that you did on Facebook as well. I thought that was a really great way to communicate with your customers. I think we highlighted that on our Facebook page as well. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'll hold all the questions to the end, and let's hear a little bit about your experience, Mark. And if memory is correct, it's April 24th when you reopened. So
That's
just coming up on your first month in a couple days.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting. We got caught a little bit off guard in some senses. We were closed for a month and a half. We had closed before that it was legally required to do so. We had made that decision because there were just so many unknowns. And it was just prudent, we thought, to just take a knee and look out and see what the environment was going to be. Just too many unanswered questions. So we did that, and we kept all of our staff on payroll. And we're having them come in at the time. Actually, our mayor actually closed things down before the governor did. So our mayor here had some restrictions in place a couple of days after we closed it down voluntarily that limited us to how many staff members, crew members we call them. I like the way you guys do that too, by the way. We could have on scene at any given time. So we had a skeleton crew here building projects, and very similar to your experience, we only had, over the entire shutdown period, we only had 6 members who froze their memberships. And so I felt that it was important to pass that blessing along to our crew members. If they were going to keep their EFTs flowing that way, then we were going to pass that along to our crew members. And that was the main reason we decided to keep people on payroll, aside from the fact that it was just something we were able to do for the sake that we'd had a really good last few years. And we have another company, Treadstone Structures, where we build climbing gyms for other people. So I was willing, although I did not have to, as it turned out, I was willing to rob Peter to pay Paul a little bit and take off my accountant if I had to, just to keep my staff on payroll. But as we were here, the reason I say all of that is while we were here for about a month building projects, we built an entirely new system island, a triple wide system scatterboard, and moved my campus wall and built a moon board and all of that. So we're doing all these things and catching up on other projects. And then on a Tuesday one week, the governor just came on and said, hey, on Friday, gyms are going to be able to be open. Gyms, movie theaters, restaurants. Well, actually, restaurants came a week later. Let me correct myself on that. But he came up and said, on Friday, you'll be permitted to reopen. And we had already been closed about a month and a half at that time. And I felt like that was an adequate period, especially since I had spent the entire time traveling around the city, taking reasonable measures, going to Lowe's and Home Depot to build those other structures that I was just talking about a second ago. And I had seen mitigation strategies elsewhere where I was coming into contact with plenty of people throughout the day, but everyone was using common sense measures like keeping a good distance. People have stopped close talking the way we used to. People have stopped shaking hands, all of these things. And there's a hyper awareness, I think, now of if you have shaken somebody's hand out of muscle memory, or if you touched some surface you're uncomfortable with or not completely comfortable with, like a gas station handle or something like that, then you had an awareness of, hey, I need to wash my hands if you have an itch on your face. So before you feel that itch, before you scratch that itch that you feel, then you would say, well, hey, I need to wash my hands before I can do something like that. So I think that awareness and the social distancing and staying 6 feet apart were the most effective things that people did that I observed as I was walking around. And everywhere I went, I would ask just about every Home Depot, Lowe's employee, every fast food drive-through, all of which were open, every one of them, and just flowing people through in mass. And I would ask all of those employees, hey, are you having problems with employees going home sick with COVID? And these are people who are working full-time, being exposed to 100 people at a time for 8-hour shifts. And that was not the case for them. So I knew that there had to be some mitigation strategies that would work. And what we did specific to climbing gyms, though, was immediately after we closed down, the first thing we did, of course, is stripped all the holds off the wall. And we always like an opportunity to do a clean sweep like that anyway. So we wanted to repaint the walls, and we had intended to, but we had 3 days to get all the holds back on the walls if we wanted to open on Friday. when the governor said, hey, 3 days from now, you guys can reopen. And because I felt like it had been long enough, it wasn't because he said we could, because I felt like we had been closed long enough, I wanted to open on Friday. I had also, part of my logic too, with building the other structures was that if we had people who were continuing to pay their membership EFTs, then I felt like, in addition to the benefit of them keeping our staff on payroll, their friends, of course, I also wanted them to get something out of it, and I wanted them to have those new structures, the training island in the middle, and we also built an outdoor climbing area out behind our gym. We're on the city bike path, so I've got a pretty large grassy area right by the bike path on the backside of my gym, and so we built that too. We built a double-wide system wall back there, and that's just something I've always wanted to have. So I wanted them to feel like they were getting something out of continuing to pay that EFT, and I wanted to show my gratitude for that. Of course, EFTs, you've always heard it, and we found this out, we did, that memberships and those recurring memberships just keep the electricity on. That's really, you make your money on groups, and you make your money on new sales and day passes and things. And of course, we hadn't had day passes, day pass sales, group sales, any of that, any kind of new sales during that period. So when I say that the EFTs were still turned on, I mean, that was still just a trickle of what we had, experienced beforehand, probably about a fifth of what we used to experience with day passes and group sales and that sort of thing. So it's not like we were just rolling in it by any means. And I didn't know how long this was going to go on. And I'm glad we were able to open up when we did.
When you guys originally opened, I believe you had a capacity limit at 20 people, and
20.
you're planning on moving up to 50. Are you at 50 now?
We're at 50, yeah. Now, we have a large space. I have a 12,000 square foot space in 3 sections. We've got Ninja Warrior and a parkour space as well. So my Ninja Warrior area is 2,000 square feet, and it's partitioned off. And then we've got a 4,000 square foot parkour area that's partitioned off. And so the remainder of that, 7,000 square feet, depending on how you count it, is technical climbing area. And so I did use COVID as an excuse to do some hygiene things that I had always wanted to do to make us climbing shoe only, even for kids in the technical climbing area. We have treated the outer perimeter of the walls in the Ninja area as sort of a kids climbing area. It's less technical climbing, a little bit more chutes and ladders in orientation. And for that, of course, a lot of kids will wear their street shoes. And so one of the things that I did that I borrowed from our jiu-jitsu dojo for my kids was we put a bleach pan at check-in to where you could actually dip the soles of your shoes in a pan of bleach and then blot it onto a carpet before you come in. And that's actually been really popular. A lot of people have said, wow, I've never really thought of that, but it does give people some comfort in terms of getting on the Ninja rigs and getting in the parkour area. It kind of makes the whole gym a bit of a sanctuary for the things that people naturally track in just from the outside world. And I'm not a germaphobe by any means, but the bottoms of shoes just pick up everything in the world. And if you just think about a public restroom all by itself, it's just not the happiest thought. So I did sort of use this as an opportunity to do what my jiu-jitsu dojo had done, and something that I had wanted to copy for a little while. And with regard to COVID on that, if the transport mechanism primarily for this, the vector, I guess, is the new lingo for this, is projectile spittle particles or what have you. I mean, all of those are heavier than air. They all go down to the ground. So everywhere you walk, I mean, I do think it's a bit COVID specific, that everywhere you walk, you could pick that up and track it in. One of the things that I was confused by early on, and I had this explained to me pretty well by a medical professional, it's one of our members, is that my understanding of a virus my whole life has been that they're fairly fragile outside of a moist, biological, warm host, right? So living on a surface, a hard, cold, metal, metallic, wooden, whatever surface, isn't something that they can survive on very well. So I don't exactly see a germ around every corner with even this outbreak, but it is more resilient. And I don't know if people have come across this. I'm sure everybody's watching everything. So I don't mean to insult your intelligence if you know this already, but it's actually a protein wrapped in a little fat jacket. So it's a little bit more resilient than most viruses. So I do buy that it lasts longer on surfaces than other viruses would. But the CDC even just came out in the last day or two with findings that having a surface that you touch as a vector is actually not quite the dangerous thing that it was at first thought it might be. No one knew. And if you don't know, then absolutely take more precautions. I was on board with that. Like I said, I closed early before I had to because I was on board with that. I even had 2 crew members who, after the shutdown, I thought inadvisedly traveled someplace to a too public of a gathering, and I didn't let them come into the gym for 2 weeks. So, I took this very seriously from the outset, and we have not had what I would call, or we have not had that much at all what I would call negative feedback. Of course, some people have. We've had some fairly mild Instagram posts where it was called irresponsible to open so soon, but to my mind, we were closed a month and a half. And I saw mitigation strategies work elsewhere. Amazon.com has still got people working full time delivering to people's houses. Home Depot, Lowe's, all these places. There are things that would work there for them. So I felt like they could work for us too.
All right. Do you happen to know if any of those negative comments you saw online were from people in your community or your members, or were they from somewhere else?
No, they weren't actually. I really can only think of 2, to be honest. And neither of them were gym owners. Neither of them were members of our facility. It was just someone with one of those random sounding handles on Instagram that you can't even identify. So I don't really sweat that. The other gym owners, instantly, it was really great because, the Climbing Business Journal called us and wanted to do an interview. We did 2 interviews with Rock and Ice magazine, one with climbing gym magazines. And so we were doing quite a bit of that, and everybody we talked with was very supportive. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. I really expected more flack, but everyone was really supportive.
Good. And how's your experience been at DynoClimb, Britt or Michelle? I know earlier on the call you were mentioning that your members gave you a lot of positive feedback on the amounts of communication that you were pushing out around this. Have you seen any negative reaction online or in person?
There hasn't been any negative reaction online or in person at this point. Everything has been very positive. Our members are happy to be climbing again. They understand with us being so vocal online and using social media and showing them what we have done, we have definitely built up confidence in what we do day in, day out. One thing that we were going to talk to before is just basically systematic approach and a culture. So for us, from our very inception, was building a culture of cleanliness. So even before we had these standards and implementation and everybody going, to make sure that we're cleaning more, we had actually employed, we had created a consistent approach to cleaning and maintenance. So with that, we obviously increased it and upped the quantity and time frames and doing every 2 hours at this point, but our systems were in place. It was a culture that we had implemented from the very beginning. So from that, our members had seen that pre-COVID. So from now, they understand that we are even looking at it more seriously from that standpoint too. So for our good, went even higher to accommodate what now good looks like. So from that, we built a very strong backing of, yes, we understand you guys have been doing that from the beginning. Thank you for what you're doing to continue that going forward. So ultimately, everything's been very positive from that. The only sort of feedback that I've gotten is based on time frames at this point for climbing. We're going 2-hour blocks at this point with 1 reservation per day. We're going to take a look at that approach organically and see if that's something that we can open up to maybe 2 2-hour time blocks on non-peak time frames going forward starting next week. From that standpoint, any peak times, so nights and weekends, are primarily just going to be 2-hour blocks to climb. Another thing that we've gotten feedback is the mask aspect of things. So from that standpoint with us, we've decided to go highly recommend masks, but not requiring it at this standpoint. That is what our state and local is recommending. So from here, that is our call from what we're going to do on that in-house with masks.
Are you treating masks for your employees the same way, or are you requiring masks for staff members?
So with staff members, when they're clocked in on shift and in the building, they must be wearing masks. When they're clocked out off shift, that is their choice to either wear a mask or not wear a mask. At that point, they have the same rights as a day pass or not a day pass, a member or a punch member. Same thing. I've had questions before on are you allowing our crew members to climb? Yes, they have to book the same time frames that anybody else would too as well, and you only get one per day. But when they're off the clock, they are not an employee. Obviously, they're a representation of us, so they need to be not in our work attire. They need to be off the clock and a representation of being a member, of course, but they are not required to wear a mask when they're off the clock.
Okay. With the 2-hour time slots you're doing, have you hit capacity on those this week?
At this point, we haven't hit capacity on it, which has been good because we're able to anticipate and spread out. Since we're only allowing the 2-hour time block on there, we're getting the same amount of traffic that we were getting pre-COVID, but it's a better spread of things. Before, you'd have a ton of people coming in nights and weekends specifically. So right now we're seeing an influx of more people in the mornings, first thing, and then basically tapering off midday and then increasing again on the night, as opposed to being completely dead during the day and then exploding at night from what we've previously seen with our traffic flow.
Yeah, and that's been another fun thing to kind of figure out because everyone's work schedules are different now. People are working from home or they have their kids home with them. They're not in school and everything's different. So we're kind of seeing when our peak times are now, what that's going to look like. And it'll be interesting to see what the weekend looks like. This will be our first open weekend coming up and just see how that pans out. So.
And I believe at Treadstone, you aren't doing any sort of reserved time slots, right, Mark?
We're not. And again, we're such a large space, it hasn't really been necessary. So, and in the beginning too, of course, because we were as early in just the life cycle of this reaction to this crisis, people were definitely just dipping their toes in the water and, building their confidence gradually. So at the very beginning, we were seeing, just trickles of people coming back in the beginning a month ago. But honestly, now it's gotten to where it feels pretty busy most days, and it's a lot of children. A lot of people are comfortable bringing their children in, which is, to me, something that says a lot.
Yeah. And in that initial opening, you didn't go members only, right, Mark? It was open to public, yeah.
Yeah, it was. But so just to touch on our procedures that we had in place, again, we were as early as we were. So we were more conservative in the beginning than we are now. And as we went along, that was that continuum. But in the beginning, we weren't taking cash. We set it up so that all transactions could be done, not only just on our iPads, but from their phones. We actually set up some additional functionality on mobile device interaction with our point of sale system, which we use MindBody, by the way. We're probably one of the only climbing gyms that's not on Rock Gym Pro yet. But MindBody's been pretty good to us, and we were able to integrate better with people's mobile platforms so that they didn't even have to touch our iPads if they didn't want to. Okay. And but most people felt pretty comfortable with that, especially since we had the hand sanitizer right there at the counter. We have bleach everywhere. We have a bleach mop that sits out continuously, and we're mopping the entryway on a regular basis. Every time somebody uses one of the bathrooms, we're taking a bleach rag and going in and wiping down handles and frequently touched surfaces, and leaving that out visible at the front desk actually too, just to say, hey, we are bleaching stuff. I'm very dust conscious with the staff, so that members are aware that, I mean, if they see dust at all, of course, that just says, hey, this hasn't been wiped down in, who knows how long.
And have you hit capacity at all over the last month?
I would say in the last week, we've been pretty close to the 50 that we're making it a limit of now. Yeah.
Are you having people check in and check out, or just having your staff monitor?
No, we haven't. We haven't had a need to. Again, such a large space. My reasoning on it is that you could have 20 people in the climbing zone, 10 people in the ninja zone, and 20 people in the parkour zone, and be at 50 and have people really well spread out. And that social distance is really the most effective part of it. And of course, people come in as couples and as families and as roommates. And I mean, we're here at Fort Benning, so a lot of our members, probably 60% of our members and clientele are military. And, a lot of them come from units that were their roommates in a barracks room together and things like that. So, I mean, they're coming in as groups.
Right. And so over at DynoClimb with the Rock Gym Pro, with the new patches that they've released, how are you ensuring that people check out at the end? You have those awesome stations that you set up. Do you have an employee encouraging people to use them, or?
Correct. So we have basically like a concierge at the front. So they're kind of like the touch point when it comes down to entry, temperature check, reminder that to check out on the opposite side, because that's new for our members, like Michelle was talking about. They're used to coming into one place and then exiting out that one place. So from that, obviously it's big for us too, and we added signage for that to make sure that people weren't coming back the other way, doing the one direction going around the loop. But from that, at this point, we were going on day 4. So the first 2 days, it was kind of like a hard aspect of trying to monitor it. We would actually, at the end of the 2 hours, we'd just go back through, make sure to do a head count, actual head count, make sure people had checked out. Going forward in the last day, 2 days so far, everything has been smoother from there. We've only had like one situation where people weren't really clocking out, checking out. So for the most part, it's, organically going in the direction that we want it to be. With that said, we're still doing the head counts every 2 hours to make sure that we're accurately keeping track of everybody in the building too as well. But for the most part, 99% of the people are scanning out now. It's basically getting into that routine. So changing that process from when they were, not doing that previously to now, now I got to remember to check out, scan. But the signage is in place, and with us going back and following through, we've got that double redundancy to make sure our counts are accurate too as well.
Right.
And we also have the PA system, so we can announce like a 10-minute warning before the 2-hour time slot's up. Just kind of give people a chance to finish up, pack up, wash up, and remind them again to check out on their way out. So.
And it sounds like you guys have seen most people staying almost that full 2 hours, and then even wanting to stay longer and get into the next.
There was a question on that I saw for the chat. So what we're doing to let people know is we're doing like the PA aspect of announcement, or if there's not many people in the building too, we're going person by person and just letting them know, hey, your time frame's coming. We have had some situations when we first started off where people wanted to stay, even if it was really slow, we were not letting people, and we're still not letting people this week. The reason for it is just getting our processes down and making sure our routines are good, and making sure we're able to, address those things before we start opening up to crossover or non-peak time frames. Most likely next week we'll be starting to do two-hour blocks and non-peak time frames. But for the most part, there wasn't anybody really giving us a bad time about it. Everybody's very understanding. Most people understand at this point that we all had to sacrifice something. So the time frame where we would see people climbing all day, every day, previously pre-COVID, those people are even understanding that there are sacrifices that need to be made to make sure that everybody as a whole can get their opportunity to climb, especially after not climbing for 2 months, basically. So for the most part, everybody's very understanding that they have that block and that their time is up. They've got tomorrow where they can come in and climb again.
I'm gonna dive into some of these questions that people have been typing in. Thanks for entering all those, everyone, and keep them coming. We'll get to as many as we can. So it looks like the most popular question we have is just a question about whether you've been alerted to anyone on your staff or any of your customers presenting symptoms with COVID-19, whether that was from them or from maybe a local public health authority. Have you had to navigate that yet?
At this point for us, we haven't had any situation. With temperature checks too as well, we haven't had to actually refuse anybody at this point too. So that's a bridge we'll cross when we come to there, but we do have mitigation measures in that standpoint. We do also appreciate the measures that Rock Gym Pro has in terms of trace points. But we have a systematic approach that we're going to be looking at from that to make sure, obviously, with those contact measures that we are following it from there. We have protocols that, obviously, if you come into contact or are diagnosed, you need to immediately reach out to myself or Michelle. And then obviously going from that standpoint to address, do we have the option to shut down the gym and do a mitigation measure of full clean or what have you, or to organically approach the situation based on trace points or anything like that, that we can go from there.
And that's another good reason for people to be checking in and out, is that if somebody was in the gym and they were diagnosed with COVID or something like that, we would know who was in at that same time frame, and we have all their contact info to reach out and contact them as well, saying that there's a potential there that want to get checked out or watch for symptoms.
And how about up in Georgia? Have you run into this issue, Mark?
We have not had any cases, knock on wood, but we had one crew member who's someone in his family close to him. We weren't sure, but she was exhibiting symptoms and this, that, and the other. So that crew member, fortunately, was a manager who could do a lot of work value added from home. So we've just been allowing him to do that.
Okay. Great. Let's see. I imagine it's probably a little bit early for you guys up in DynoClimb. I have a question here about whether anyone started youth programs or what kind of plans you have to offer, any summer programs, camps, and what have you that you would normally be able to offer. And I believe you said you already have a bunch of kids in the gym on a daily basis, Mark?
We do, but we have camp starting on June 1st is what was scheduled originally. And so we had a managers meeting just 2 weeks ago to decide whether or not we were going to actually go ahead with that. And we have decided to. Again, we're such a large space. It helps as far as limiting capacity and that sort of thing. So, but there were a lot of regulations that came down from Georgia, from the state, about 30 of them, if we're actually reviewing them still. Things that you have to do, and they're all common sense. They're all things like, you can't prepare their food or touch their food. Mostly just hygiene related things that make sense, and things that, that's the other thing too, is gyms being open. I mean, gyms are used to having to deal with things like MRSA and bleach down their mats and things like this. So I actually think that we're, as an industry, pretty well prepared for dealing with something like this, because it really comes down to germs at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so up in DynoClimb, what have you guys been thinking about? And I'm just maybe assuming here that you're probably a little ways off from diving into those programs.
It hits a sore spot because our first camp was actually supposed to happen when this all went down. So right
spring
before
break camp planned.
Spring break camp going, and then obviously we had to shut that from happening. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna organically look at the protocols and make sure that we're following things correctly from that. Hit on what's the recommendation for it. At this point, we've shut down everything, and we're not going to obviously continue anything going forward until we get clear protocols on expectations from there too. At this point, we've even stopped doing group classes, so we're going to hold off on any group classes until we get further communication, as well as, feel things out organically for when we can start doing any sort of group activities such as yoga, our fitness, as well as group classes too. So at this point, we aren't offering any of the classes that we normally would do, or also the programs that we would do at this point.
Yeah. Did
Same here.
while you were closed, did you surface any of the fitness or yoga classes digitally?
Yes, so we had some content available. Had the ability, much like Mark, the community's been amazing. People opted in, and we were able to keep all of our 21 employees on staff. So from that, we had people do captainships. We had live content online. We also did pre-recorded content too as well within the guidelines of what we could do in terms of people actually at the facility employee-wise. So from that, we leveraged a lot of that social media to stay in contact and also build those relationships stronger with those members and athletes to provide those options, much like other gyms did to, keep in contact and keep that constant contact.
Yeah.
And are you continuing to offer those digital classes now that you're opened, or did you switch just to things happening in the gym?
Correct. So we are still having yoga classes that we have online. We're doing those intermittently through the week. We're offering those for our members. So we do have some members that are fitness only. So we obviously want to cater to them and make sure that we're providing them options and let them know that we haven't forgot about them during this time too.
Yeah, and it's just been really cool because it's gotten some more interest from people who wouldn't normally have taken a yoga class, and you can do it from the comfort and safety of your own home.
Yeah.
And get into trying new things. And I think that might be something we continue going forward, regardless, to have occasional online live yoga classes and fitness classes as well.
Yeah, very cool. And down in Treadstone, I believe I saw on your site, Mark, that you had aerial yoga and some silks classes that you discontinued or put on hold rather. Any other classes that you've either put on hold or kept going?
All of them have been put on hold. In fact, camp will be the first thing that comes back.
Okay.
I do a Mondays with Mark coaching session with myself every week, and that's I haven't even been doing that, honestly. I haven't been trying to conglomerate people into groups for the foreseeable future. Silks is actually not back yet. It's just a high contact. It's fabric, so it's a bit of a better host, I guess, than a hard surface would be. So, and the person who runs our silks program is a medical professional also. So, she's in the hospital all day, every day. So just for the sake of prudence, we decided to hold off on that for just a short period of time more. And we're looking at how to bring that back here in the next week or two, honestly. Okay. So that should be back pretty soon.
Great. I've got a couple questions here back on the mask side of things. I'm going to kind of combine them together. One question's asking, how many customers do you find opting in to wear masks in the facility? And then also, have you had any conflicts between people who are and are not wearing masks, and maybe even like just inter-customer conflicts around physical distancing as well? Have there been any challenges there?
So for us, we haven't had any conflicts whatsoever in-house. We have had some members reach out via email to me saying they're just not comfortable or not ready yet to go into the facility without wearing a mask, which I think is going to be the majority of people that obviously feel that way. They're going to just, keep their account frozen or just, have that situation. That's their choice from there, of course, in terms of comfort level. With climbers in the gym that have been wearing the masks, for the most part, people have been wearing the mask when they're not climbing, but then when they're climbing, it's very difficult to wear a mask while you're climbing routes too as well for an extended period of time. With the breathing aspect of things, as well as even getting really hot in there. We run our gym pretty cool. We've got 5 different AC units. We also added like UV filtration to our AC units too as well, and obviously fresh air recirculation. But nonetheless, it gets really hot when you're breathing on that mask. So for a lot of people, they have tried it. Our Monday, we had a lot of people come in with masks, wearing the mask, going up, climbing a route and being like, I cannot do this. This is really, really, I'm having breathing issues from the mask, trying to climb in the mask. So with that, that was one of the steps also in terms of organically taking that data where it might just not be feasible for a lot of people to be climbing in a mask, let alone if you have a respiratory situation like asthma or any sort of breathing difficulties from there, you try to put a mask on in that, and it could be something where it spawns another that health aspect.
Yeah. And how about you, Mark? Any tiffs between customers?
No tiffs, no. I mean, we make masks available for free. I don't even charge for them. I spent $50 on a box of them and put them out at the front counter for someone who wants to wear one. My logic is a bit different from what they've done down in Florida, in the sense that I feel like if the members aren't going to wear them, then I don't have a need to make crew members wear them if the members aren't going to be wearing them. But that's a choice that I made. The other, if I were though, when I did consider it, and there are some reasons why I didn't. One of the ones that you had mentioned, Brett, was that when you're exerting yourself a lot inside a mask, you're expelling the CO2 that you're breathing back in. So, I mean, number one, that builds up when you're exerting yourself. When you see people running or cycling or things like this with a mask on, that can be pretty distressing in a respiratory sense. And yeah, just the heat, just the stuffiness of it. Now, it's better for us, by the way, because we're not in Florida. I know you guys are in love with your air conditioning down there. And I do envy you the 5 air conditioning units and keeping it nice and cool. We're in a 30-year-old building that's kind of flimsy, so our air conditioners work really hard to keep up as far as keeping things cool. But we've been really blessed this year with actually having spring in Georgia. That normally never happens. So, in fact, I have all my bay doors are open right now, and I've got really big exhaust fans that pull air through this facility. And so that natural air circulation, I think, has been one of the few 2020 blessings of this season, is that it's been pretty mild, which we don't have in Georgia normally. We normally have 3 days of spring and then straight into, almost 100-degree summer weather. And that has not been the case this year. We've had 2 months of mild. So I've been able to keep airflow in here like I'd prefer to anyway. It's just nicer, I think.
And we've got a couple questions here on your operating hours. Did either of you change open times, closing times at all?
No, nothing that we've changed.
All right, cool. And question here. So with those 2-hour time blocks that you have, Britt, are you guys doing cleaning between those blocks? And like what kind of time period are you allowing for that process?
Correct. So we're doing cleaning within those 2-hour time frames to hit all touch points. So everything is on that 2-hour time frame. So we open up at 10, we hit the cleaning the night before, but then we also do a cleaning walkthrough in the mornings. So we'll bring people in at an hour beforehand just to make sure everything is ready to go. And then we'll go 10 to 12 is the first block. So then we'll hit the cleaning. We start usually about 30 minutes to, and we'll hit the high touch points that people have passed through. So the doors, things that the next wave is going to be touching. So doors, front end with that one-way traffic, and then we'll push through so that within that 30 minutes, we're getting everybody that's coming ahead of that, cleaning behind them, and hitting that next group that's coming in at 12 o'clock. So we try to keep that 2-hour time frame to mitigate as much of that, in between time zones as possible, or cross-contamination as much as possible within those time frames. So basically on that 2-hour cleaning regimen and that 2-hour time block.
Okay. And it sounds like you've tried to be really visible with your cleaning, Mark, rather than shutting down for cleaning times.
Well, yes, that, but also I do understand why a lot of stores are closing early so that they can spend more time cleaning. Certainly, again, we have a lot of square footage, so I think it's important to sweep and mop with bleach water every inch of the floor each night, and that takes a minute. I've actually even done some of those shifts myself just to see how feasible it is to do that. And it takes a minute. I mean, it takes a lot longer. It takes like a good hour and a half to really get that done with 3 staff members, 3 crew members.
All right. Let's see, we're getting close to the end of our hour here, so let's maybe leave on a more fun, uplifting question. I've got a question here about outreach to people in in your larger community in your towns who might not have tried climbing before. On our last call, uh, the other gym in Georgia, Adrenaline, shared that they'd seen a little bit of an influx of people that are new to the sport joining up with memberships. I know you're open just to members right for this week up in DynoClimb, but do you guys have any medium-term or long-term plans on engaging people that aren't already part of your gym community?
Definitely. Our members have been great advocates for us too, as well, bringing in friends, family in the past. From that too, as well, we've gotten a very, even though we're new within ours, we're going on a year anniversary coming August 23rd. But we've actually had people asking questions, reaching out, new members trying to sign up too as well. So from that, our community has been our best advocate for continuing and driving that. And there is interest on there too as well. We've had some previous day pass users that have converted to memberships too as well, 6-month passes. So I feel pretty strongly, that once we open up for our day pass users, we're going to see that influx from there too.
Awesome. Yeah, what's your experience been like at Treadstone?
Well, now it's really gratifying to be selling new memberships again after being closed for a month and a half. But no, that has been happening, and it's been really good. I think people were chomping at the bit. Well, they were. I mean, they were definitely chomping at the bit to get out of their house and to get back into gyms. And so yeah, they have, and we've had people who, and we do actually, as long as we don't go over that capacity that we talked about, that we cap ourselves at, we are actually selling day passes too. So I want to make that clear.
Okay.
But the same deal, the questionnaire when they come in, that sort of thing, symptoms, all of that. But those have converted to memberships as readily as ever.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's always good to hear. And then yeah, hopefully as restrictions relax and people get more comfortable, that'll just keep growing and growing. Sure seems like every conversation I've had with people makes that seem like the most likely scenario right now. So nice little bit of good news to end on. Just going to remind everyone, next week we'll have our webinars for you again, Tuesdays and Thursdays as always at 10 a.m. And a big thank you to DynoClimb and Treadstone for joining us, to Britt, Michelle, and Mark. If you guys have more questions, you can always get in touch with anyone at the CWA directly. We're going to keep putting all of this information out there for you guys and getting you guys connected. But yeah, really any questions at all that you have, just feel free to call us directly. We're here for you. So thanks again to our panelists, and we will see you guys all on our next call on next Tuesday. Have a great weekend, everyone.